Hey guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm going to be doing my most disappointing books of 2021. So because I've read significantly less books this year than I have in the past years, instead of doing my top 10 for each of these categories, I'm only going to be doing my top 5 most disappointing books of the year. I honestly didn't have more than 5. 5 was like kind of my limit. If I was going to push it outside of that, I would be talking about books that I actually liked a lot more. So we're going to keep it at those 5. And these books are by no means bad books. They're just books that just didn't work for me. And a lot of them is because I had really high expectations for them and they just didn't live up to them. So the first book that I'd like to talk about is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. So this is the 4th novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, which is by far my favorite series by Sarah J. Maas so far. But I didn't love this book. I think I actually did a full review on this book if you guys want to check that out to see more of my thoughts on it, especially like after I had just finished reading it. I think I forgot going into it that my least favorite character in like the whole series was Nesta. Nesta is the oldest sister and she's supposed to kind of be like that protector, and she kind of is that kind of protector for Elaine. She's just not like that at all for Farah, which just really annoyed the crap out of me because it's just it was just super annoying. I hated that sibling relationship so much, and I still hate it in this novel. But I think the reason why I had so much hope for it is because I love Cassian. I love Cassian so much in the 2nd and 3rd novels in the series. So I was hoping, because I loved him so much, that I would end up liking Nesta more, just because that's kind of how it worked in the previous novels, because I didn't love Farah either, but I loved Rhysand. So because I liked Rhys, I ended up liking Farah. That did not happen in this one. I actually started to hate Nesta even more in this novel, and I was just like, Cassian, why are you with her? Why is this even happening? So that really frustrated me. I still found it incredibly entertaining in the way that you can't look away when something like just absolutely horrible is happening, and I didn't hate it. So there is that. It was just mildly disappointing. This is actually probably the book on this list that I enjoyed the most out of all of them. It had to be on this list just because I had so much high hopes for it, even though it's a Sarah J. Maas book, and I really shouldn't have put my hopes up that high, but I just had such high hopes for it and it did not meet those expectations at all. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is One Last Stop by Casey McKiston. And like, I feel so bad for putting this book on here because I just wanted to love it so much. I didn't go into it knowing what this book was about, and I think that's part of the reason why it was just such a big disappointment for me, because it's actually somewhat supernatural in nature, which I was not expecting there to be any supernatural sort of aspect to this novel, and it kind of threw me off. But I feel like that shouldn't have thrown me off that much because I actually love supernatural anything, and I love it when it comes into romance novels too. But I don't know, it just didn't work for me, and I wanted to love this so much because the first novel that I read by this author, Red, White, and Royal Blue, I absolutely loved just like everything about it. And then this one, just like, I don't know, I was very meh about it, given that I wanted to love it so much, and then I was just like, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't like absolutely adore it. So that's why it ended up on this list. This is actually following a character named August who meets this woman named Jane on the subway, and Jane seems to live on this subway and only exists on this subway, and also is not from this time period. So very interesting concept. I wish I had known the concept going into it, and I think I might have liked this a little bit more, but I also don't know that I would have picked this book up if I had known the concept going into it, just because it doesn't really appeal to me that much, which is just weird because I like these types of books. But it was just okay for me, and I just really wanted to love it because I had loved her first novel so much. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik, of which I've read 2 of the books, His Majesty's Dragon and Throne of Jade, which is the first and 2nd book in the series. I didn't necessarily have that high expectations going into the series, just because previously I had read 1 book by Naomi Novik, A Deadly Education. While I enjoyed, I had a lot of issues with it, and I had previously DNF'd a couple of her books, both Uprooted and Spinning Silver. So I knew that I didn't necessarily love this author, but I've heard other people like really like this particular series by her, and it has a really interesting premise. Basically, it's what would happen if you add in real dragons to the Napoleonic Wars, which is just like an awesome, really interesting premise, and I don't know how she made it as boring as it was. I still might finish this series. And the only reason I might finish this series is because I absolutely love the audiobook narrator. The audiobook narrator is Simon Vance, and I love Simon Vance. He does so many really great fantasy series. I love how he does them. He does such a good job. And I honestly think that's the only reason I got through both of these. The first one wasn't that bad because you get introduced to our main characters. I honestly don't even remember the main character's name, but you also get introduced to his dragon, Temeraire, who is like actually kind of interesting. But like that's literally all that's happening in this series is the relationship between those two, which I mean was fine, but it wasn't that amazing. And then like the second one, we get the Chinese involved. Like that's literally all I remember about the series because it was just that boring. But I like listening to Simon Vance, so I really enjoyed it because of that. It was kind of a disappointment because I honestly expected more from this author just because even though I had problems with some of her other books, her writing was still incredibly entertaining. But in this one, it just didn't really work for me, even though like premise is so incredibly interesting. So yeah, it was definitely a disappointment, but one that I might still end up reading the rest of the series just because I like the audiobook narrator that much. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I was honestly really disappointed by this one. This is the third novel in the Brown Sisters trilogy, which is a romantic contemporary series following three sisters, obviously. First we have Chloe Brown, who falls in love in Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Then we have Danny in Take a Hint, Danny Brown. Of course, we have Act Your Age, Eve Brown. I honestly didn't love Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good, but I kind of just read the next one because I was just looking for something light and easy to read. But I absolutely loved Take a Hint, Danny Brown so much. I think the couple in that one was just so much fun. Their chemistry was just really great. I loved every second of that one. That one was by far one of my favorite romances that I had read. I think that was of 2019. It might have been of 2020. Probably of 2020 now that I come to think of it. So I was really excited for Act Your Age, Eve Brown, and I hated it. I did not like her love interest. I kind of got annoyed that all of the sisters basically had the same like sort of personality. Not exactly the same. It was like a little bit of the same personality, and it annoyed me. And I do realize like it kind of felt like it was sort of fight for diversity because they were on the spectrum. I don't know. It seemed odd that they would all be like that. It didn't work for me in the real life. Eve, I don't know. As a character, they were trying to make it seem like she was like the dumbest of the sisters, but like she had like other aspects of her that made her useful. But I felt like she could have been smarter. Like she didn't have to be book smart to be smart in other ways. The other ways that she was like supposed to be smart in, she wasn't. So like, I don't know, her character just didn't work for me, and I didn't like her as a character, and then I just like, it just didn't work for me. Like it was definitely a huge disappointment, especially after Take a Hint, Danny Brown, which I just absolutely loved so much. So I think my expectations for this one were probably just a little bit too high, and it was by far my least favorite of this series. And the last book that I'd like to talk about is Crave by Tracy Wolff. So I didn't actually have that many expectations for this book going into it. I actually only picked up this book at a request from a commenter on YouTube, actually. I think it was on my Midnight Sun video. They asked me to do a review on this series, and I was just like, I've never even heard of this series before, but it looks a lot like Twilight, so I kind of understand. It does have a lot of Twilight vibes to it, by the way. So our main character of this novel starts out the series basically with a complete tragedy. Both of her parents end up dying, and she has to go live with her cousin and uncle in this school for magical creatures. But she doesn't know it's a school for magical creatures, so it has kind of like that weird human going into like a supernatural setting sort of vibe, which is really interesting. And I actually think it does it very well. And of course, there's a romance in this because, like I said, very similar to Twilight on that aspect between our main character and a vampire who happens to be like one of the most powerful vampires, because of course he is. But then there are also like other creatures. It's not just like vampires and werewolves. There's also like dragons and like witches, and there's a bunch of different like factions, which I actually really like that aspect of it. It's like very Twilight meets Mean Girls in that sort of way, which I actually really like. I feel like because of that, as the novel kept going, I kept getting my hopes up that it would end up being like amazing, and it just wasn't. It was just like a regular YA, almost kind of new adult vibes. I got a little bit more new adult vibes from this one than YA romance, but yeah, it was just like a paranormal like YA romance, and I was kind of just expecting more from it. I still think I'm gonna continue on with the series without giving away any spoilers. There are some like unique aspects to the world building that I am actually really interested in, but we'll see. I didn't love the first one as much as I was hoping to, just based off of my initial impressions of it, but hopefully I'll end up liking the rest of the series. So I don't know. There's a lot of books in the series already out, even though it came out relatively recently. So even though I was a bit disappointed in it, I still have hopes that the rest of the series will end up being great. So that's all I have for you guys. I post videos on Tuesdays and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a